Well, hi folks, and welcome back to the old classic car channel. I thought, following on from the video that I published recently talking about streamlining things a little bit here and moving on some of the cars, I thought it's probably time to give you a bit of an update on how that particular plan is progressing. Where are things at with that particular idea? So in this video I'm going to talk about the changes that have happened just within the last few days, and also just have a bit of a chat about some of the criteria that I have for a possible replacement for the ideally 3 cars that are going to go to be replaced with 1. I discussed a lot of this in the previous video, so I won't go over too much old ground here, but basically that is the idea, to try and streamline things, make my life a little bit easier in terms of things that need looking after, because there is a lot going on at the moment. Just generally, you know, everyone's busy, everyone has really busy lives, and we're no different to that. And as someone pointed out in the comments quite recently on the video where I introduced this plan, it won't be too long before, once Harley passes his test, the youthful assistant, it's not going to be long before he starts getting thoughts about buying an old car project, whether a car on the road or one that needs a bit of fettling, and we're going to need a bit of space and time and energy for that as well. So that has also been in the back of my mind for a little while. So that is just a bit of the background to what we're trying to achieve here. And right, where am I up to with that plan? Well, number 1, the V8 Pilot. I have my the checklist of confusion here, just to sort of make sure I don't forget anything. But yes, there is now a Ford V8 Pilot sized gap in the garage here at OCCHQ. Well, I say a gap in the garage, the MX-5 is now in its place, but yes, the lovely old 1950 Ford V8 Pilot has gone to a new home, probably a better home if I'm honest. The gentleman that ended up buying it, he's been looking for one of these for quite some time, and in fact he had already watched videos about our car previous to me deciding to let it go. He's a really nice guy. He picked it up the other day. He seems very pleased with it, very happy with it, and I'm sure he's going to have a lot of fun with that. He's got just that, that's his only old car, and I think that is probably a good way to go about running, especially a car that's a bit older, needs a little bit more time and just understanding, getting your head around what it's like with an older car. So I think if you've got just the 1 or maybe the 2, that makes life a whole lot easier. So yeah, I'm happy that it's gone off to a very good home. It's down in the sort of South Midlands area, somewhere down there. So yeah, that has now gone. So part 1 of the plan has been actioned. The V8 Pilot is here no more. We had a lot of fun with it, and even now if I look at the photographs, I mean it only went a few days ago, but I was looking at the photos the other day and I thought what a fantastic looking car that was, and I'm just really glad that that is a car that I can now tick off the list in terms of cars that we've owned. And I like to try and experience as many different old cars as humanly possible, so long as it's viable to do that. So yeah, we had the V8 Pilot for just under 2 years I think. That's now gone, and now time to talk about a little black car just behind me over there. Okay, so the 1956 Standard 8. If you've been following the channel for a little while, you'll know I do like these small standards, having owned a Standard 10 Deluxe in the past with the really quite nifty stand drive transmission. That was very clever. The clutch was actuated by a little button on the gear lever. I did do a bit of a write-up on the Old Classic Car channel, the main website associated with this YouTube channel, a little while ago. That was a very clever system. 2 pedal controlled, but still a manual gearbox with the clutch actuated by a little button. That was very clever. And we did also have the Standard 10 Companion, the estate car version of a very late Standard 10. That was a really handy, practical 4-door, 4-seat estate car, but tiny, and that was probably my favourite of all the little standards we've owned so far. This I bought, well, was it 3 years ago, maybe 4 even. I should have checked before I started recording this particular video, but either way it has been with us for a little while, and yeah, it is time for this to move on. It tends to live outside. It was, to be honest, when I actually saw it, after I agreed to buy it on eBay, I traipsed down to London, and when I saw it I thought it looks like it's going to need more work than I really wanted to take on, but I'd agreed to buy it. So even though the description was a little a little wanting in places in the adverts that I bought it from. I thought, no, I've committed to buy it, so I'm going to buy it. I brought it back, and it's been a lovely little car. We have had a lot of use out of this, probably out of the 3 old cars that I plan to sort of sell on. This is probably the one that I've actually used the most. It's a really cool little thing. Tiny engine, it's only 803cc. To be honest, the Renault actually drives probably quicker than this is, for whatever reason. But yeah, it's a neat little car, very, very characterful little car indeed. And we will miss seeing this one around, but the plan is for that to go. And if everything lines up properly, and it should be actually going tomorrow, so that's why I needed to record this video today, because by this time tomorrow that may well have left the premises for good. I'm not quite sure where it's going. I think the gentleman that's interested in buying it, I think he's based over Norfolk way somewhere, so if you live over in that neck of the woods you may well spot this one out and about, maybe at some classic car events, who knows. But yes, that's the plan. That should be being collected tomorrow, all being well. It's one of those cars where I had way more money in it than I was ever going to see back when it came time to sell, and that proved to be the case. I mean, I probably sold it for about half what it actually stands me at, but that's just the way of life with old cars. It's not, for me, it's not about making a profit on these. If I can get out of things with a break even, I see that as a result. But yeah, it's not really about the money. It's about having fun with old cars, and we have had a lot of fun with this. As if you've been watching the channel for a little while, you'll see it's featured in numerous videos. I think that probably one of the most recent videos is where I did a bit of a chat, about sort of economical, cheap to buy 50s cars, contemporaries of each other, this and the Renault down the bottom there, and that was quite a good fun video to make with Harley. We took them both out, pottering down the lanes, lots of filming opportunities, and a lot of fun was had. So yes, this one has seen a lot of use. It was bought as a car to not be too precious about, so if it rained, well, they're not going to lose any sleep, and it did fulfill that role very, very well. I've just used this all year round pretty much, but it is at the stage where it probably does need a bit of restoration work. Now it is kind of a rolling restoration, sort of fix as you go along type thing. You could use it, you can run it. I could take that out for a drive now, and I'd be very confident that it would get me there and indeed back again, importantly. But yeah, there are some little jobs that want doing, some cosmetics. There's a few little bubbly bits around the lower edges, want a bit of welding at the end of the sills, that kind of thing. And like I say, I just got to the point where I only want one big, full on, everything needs doing type project, and that is the Austin AE40. So if this was going to stay with us for much longer, it wasn't really going to get any better, and I just don't have the time to get too deep into this one, so that's why that one had to go. And all being well, someone's been in touch, he's sent me the deposit and he's sent me his address details and everything ready to fill out the logbook when it's collected. So if everything goes to plan, everything lines up and goes as it should do, that will be leaving us tomorrow. It'd be sad to see that one go, but at the end of the day, there are lots and lots of old cars out there that I've never owned an example of, and I'm trying to fit in owning as many different cars as I can, even if it's only for 2 or 3 years at a time, and then try something else. And like I say, the plan at the moment is for 3 things to go here and replace them with 1. And like I say, I will talk a little bit about the criteria that I've got in the back of my mind for when I eventually choose a replacement. I don't have a replacement lined up as yet, but I do have a few thoughts on that, and I'll discuss those a little bit more in a moment. Okay, so the third car in the trio of planned for disposals is the lovely little Renault 750, or 4CV as most people know them as. Now, to be honest, of the 3, this is quite possibly the car that I will miss having around the most. I mean, just look at it, what a bonkers looking car that is. Rear engined, really novel looking little car, 4 doors, suicide doors at the front, normal doors at the back, both hinged on the centre pillar. Really weird car, really characterful car, and wherever we take this, the interest it gets is just incredible. Now, this is also the most sort of left field of the cars that we have here at OCCHQ. It's quite a weird little car. I mean, classic cars are a niche thing as it is already, and this is a niche within a niche within a niche probably. They're so weird, not many people know much about these at all. like I say, this has also featured in the video that I did with the Standard, and indeed there have been quite a few videos about the little Renault here, and it's been we've had a very interesting time with it. We've had it to quite a few gatherings, classic car gatherings, that sort of thing, and I will miss this one. Now the Pilot has gone, the Standard should be going tomorrow. Those are probably slightly more traditional classic cars, at least here in the UK. These probably have more of a following in France, to be honest. This is a UK built example, but obviously in the home country of France, I mean, over 1 million of these were made in total, so at one time, especially in France, they were everywhere. Over here, I'm guessing they weren't a super common sight, and now they are very, very rarely seen. So it is a really cute, characterful car and a proper rarity. But I also recognise that it's kind of quite a niche car, and not everyone will get it. And so I think this one will probably take a little bit longer to find a home for, which isn't a problem because I do like it. And of the three, probably this is the one that, if it didn't go straight away, well, I wouldn't be too concerned, because it is a great little thing to have around the place. And I don't like selling things particularly. I don't enjoy selling any car, a classic car or whatever. I just find it stressful, and there's so much potential for aggravation when it comes to trying to sell a car, especially an old car. You know, you can try and describe things as best as possible with photos and text and all that kind of thing, but there's so much potential for people not showing up when they say they will, people not paying for them, you know, and not showing up, people being late or not turning up on time, all these kind of things. There's so many different parameters involved with selling a car, and to be honest, I don't enjoy that at all. Once I've decided, the hardest bit for me, certainly like with this process, is actually deciding to sell something. And that is the thing that I spend the most time ruminating over and pondering and thinking about, is, do I want to sell it? Should I sell it? That is the hard bit. Once I've decided that I want to sell something, well, I just want it gone. And knows that that's the sort of stage, the process that I've had to go through with these. The decision to let the Pilot go, especially because it's such a beautiful looking car, it was like, it took a long time to come round to finally deciding to let that one go. And the only way I could sort of ease the decision making in my mind was, well, if that and the other two go, I can buy something else, and it'll mean that I have fewer things to look after. I can get everything under cover, because that's important as well, and I can get something else that's interesting, because like I say, I want to try different things along the way and try and experience a number of different cars, and that's what I've been trying to do for the last 30-40 years, and that's what I'm continuing to do now. So that's kind of how I rationalise getting rid of things which I still like. I still like the Pilot and the Standard and the Renault and blah blah blah, but you know, sometimes you just have to sort of have a bit of a change and reduce the amount of things that you've got to look after, and that is the driver behind this. So like I say, the Renault, that is destined to go, and I'm sure it will go, but it'll probably take a bit longer to find the right home for that one compared to the other two, because obviously we're in Great Britain, and cars built in Great Britain, British classic cars, they're probably always going to be easier and quicker to sell than some slightly weird foreign job, which is a lot more niche and, like I say, not really that well known here in the UK. So that'll probably take a little bit longer, but it will be heading off to a new home at some point in time. I'll advertise that. Actually, I think it's already advertised, in fact. So if you want a Renault 750, a very rare right-hand drive version of the 4CV, because most 4CVs are French market cars and left-hand drive, but if you want a right-hand drive one of these, please get in touch. But yeah, so that is the 4CV. So I think we're up to date with where the plan is at this moment in time. Like I said, this is just a bit of an update video. So Pilot gone, Standard goes tomorrow, that'll go at some point. And now I'm going to talk a little bit about the criteria that I'm going to use when it comes to finding a replacement for these three. Like I say, the idea is to pool any money that these three raise and spend some of it, not all of it, but spend some of it on a replacement. And now I'm going to talk a little bit about the criteria for that replacement. Okay, so some of the considerations for deciding on a replacement for these three. Well, first and foremost, I want something that, on paper at least, isn't going to be a big project, because like I've discussed before, every old car that you buy, restored, unrestored, whatever, it's a project. I don't mind the project. I like working on these things, but I like the idea of having fewer things that need work doing to them. So the idea is to try and find something that's kind of up and running already, might want a bit of fettling, but kind of is there or thereabouts, and can be used without a major strip down. Of course, when you're talking old cars, you never really know what the future holds, but you can try and stack the odds in your favour a little bit by really putting some thought into what you're interested in, what sort of car you want, and then how easy they are to keep on the road. One of the things I've got on my list of criteria is parts availability. Can you get the bits for them? When I had Big Dodge restored way back in the late 2000s, that was probably the ultimate test for me of owning something that needed restoring and there were no parts around, or virtually no parts available for it. You'd think, being an American truck, they must have made thousands and thousands of these things, and there must be yards full of parts, used parts, new parts, that kind of thing. But no, the smaller commercial vehicles like the pickup, yes, they are around in reasonable numbers, and there are lots of bits and pieces available for them, and they're not too bad to get the bits for in America. Not so much over here, but as long as you can buy them in America, that's good enough. But Big Dodge, there was virtually nothing available. They weren't made in the same numbers as the smaller trucks. Everything is scaled up, so there's very little parts transfer between the half-ton pickup and the 3-ton truck, even though at first glance they do look kind of similar, just slightly different sizes. So yeah, parts availability is a real consideration when it comes to sort of picking a replacement for these three. And yeah, because if you can't find parts, it just makes life a whole lot more difficult. And as I've said before, possibly one of the best, certainly the older cars, are the Austin 7, and then going a little bit later you've got the Morris Minor, the MGBs, that kind of thing. They are really well supported for spares here in the UK, and if you sort of spread the net a little bit further afield to America, then you've got the Model A Ford bits available anyway. Even over here there are loads of bits available for Model A's, new and used, so they are a very good choice. So something that has reasonable parts availability either here in the UK or further afield is a definite consideration when it comes to picking a replacement for these three, because you can make a lot of work for yourself if you buy the wrong car. If you buy something really, really obscure, you've got to be prepared for really having to put the time and the effort in to find parts. Like I say, Big Dodge, there was nothing available. Piston rings had to be made specially for it. All the body mouldings, because it's like it was coach built over here, all the body mouldings had to be made specially for it. You can't just buy the right section stuff off the shelf. So that was a huge, huge undertaking. And what's next on my list? It's got to be interesting. Obviously, I mean, I like cars from all different eras, from the 1920s, and some cars maybe up to the 1980s. After that, not so much. But what I did notice, what really struck me was, I do that classic thing of going on the classic cars for sale type websites and eBay and all that sort of thing, putting in the age ranges from sort of 1950 to 1970 or 55 to 75, whatever. And I'd be scrolling through page after page looking around. And I did this one evening. I started looking at cars from sort of the early 50s through to the mid 70s, and there were some lovely cars, don't get me wrong, within the budget that I'll probably be working to once these three have all gone. There were some fantastic cars around, but great as they were, and they're lovely cars, I mean, there's no faulting so many of the cars that are available. A lot of them didn't really grab me enough to say, yes, I really want to go and buy that. So maybe it's because I've been interested in this for so long, and so many of them are quite familiar now, that they didn't grab me quite as much. And this was sort of made really apparent when I started putting my searches a little bit further back in time, sort of 20s, 30s, into the sort of late 1940s, and suddenly there just seemed to be a whole lot more cars that were of interest to me. Everyone's different, like I say. Some people are well into their 70s cars. A lot of people have nostalgia for the cars they grew up with, in which case for me that would be 70s and 80s cars. And there are some 70s and 80s cars that I would really consider owning. You know, I'd love a Saab 99 Turbo, or possibly even a Triumph Dolomite Sprint, something like that. I could definitely see something like that here one day. But it became really evident that my real interest, the kind of thing that I really like, is a little bit further back in time, when I was sort of scrolling through the adverts for 20s, 30s and into the 40s cars. There just seemed to be so many more things that really grabbed me and, you know, shouted to me, buy me, buy me. And I was looking thinking, oh, I really like the look of that. And that kind of is swaying my decision making. I've always liked pre-war cars anyway. If you remember, I had a 20s Dodge Tourer for 10 years, and that went 2-3 years ago, something like that, and that was a really great fun car, so different to drive compared to even the post-war car from the 1950s, pre-war. And especially when you go even 20s to 30s, there is a big difference between them. By the 1930s, cars were getting a lot easier to drive, and pedal layouts and gear layouts were sort of starting to become standardised. But in the 20s, things were a lot more up in the air in terms, I mean, you've only got to look at the Model T and the pedal arrangements and what the pedals actually do. The Dodge, the pedal layout was in the wrong way around. It had a central throttle, and the gears were all over, I can't even remember now, but the gears were all in the wrong position, so it really focused your mind. But as a result, it was way more interesting. You know, the challenge of driving a pre-war car, especially one from the 1920s, is a whole different league. You know, if I drive the MX-5, much as I love driving it, it doesn't feel like an old car, even though it's 30 years old now. You know, it feels like a modern-ish car, maybe a 10-12-year-old car to drive, which is great, and I love it. But I really like the involvement and the challenge of driving and owning something a little bit older. But you've got to balance older and more interesting also with being able to find the parts and actually keep the thing running. If you go too obscure, then you're into making parts, like I was with a big truck, which is great. You know, if you've got the time and the energy and the resources to do that, that is perfect. But these are some of the things that I found I had to think about when doing and tailoring some of my searches online for potential replacements for these three, because I want to find something interesting, something that really grabs me, but also something that is viable to keep on the road. And there are so many considerations when going through this process, and I'm sure many of you watching this will be familiar if you've owned a classic car or a vintage car now. I'm sure you'll have gone through the exact same thought process in terms of what really suits your situation, what work you can do and what work you would have to potentially farm out if anything ever went wrong. And that really it really guides the thought process when it comes to choosing something old to buy next time around. What else have I got on my list here? Usable. It's got to be usable. I've got to be able to get some use out of it, because otherwise, you know, it kind of defeats the object of this plan, reducing the numbers and making life a little bit easier. But I want to be able to use it. So it's got one of the criteria I had. I mean, Harley was suggesting some sporty type cars, but really that isn't what I'm looking for, because it needs to carry the three of us, and picnic set, food, maybe some chairs to sit on during the day if we go out to an event. So it's got to be practical, so I need to be able to fit at least 4 people in it, at the very least. So yeah, practicality is a bit of a thing as well on the list, and that has ruled out a lot of sporty cars which I would love to own, but really this time around I'll need to be looking at a saloon or something along those lines, possibly even a classic estate car, who knows. So what cars have made it onto the potentials list so far? Well, I've just jotted down some of the cars that I've been having a very close look at, and to begin with, the MG Magnette. Now these were sort of mid to late 1950s, and like I say, the Pilot was 1950, and I've been trying to sort of decide whether do I want to go a little bit newer than that, possibly a little bit more usable, or do I want to go a little bit older, closer to the age of cars that really grab me. Is that something that maybe it would be a good idea to go for? There's a lot going for them. They're 4-door. They were quite a sporting saloon, I suppose, of the 1950s. Lovely wooden dashboards in them. Great styling by Gerald Palmer. Very similar looking to the Wolseley 444, but with the twin-carb B-Series engine 1500cc, just under. So that's one of the cars that I really like the look of. So yeah, there's a lot to be said for something like that, but you probably want to buy a good one, because if you buy a poor one you could be into a lot of welding, especially because they've got monocoque bodies, no separate chassis, and there are lots and lots of opportunities for monocoque cars of the 50s and especially the 60s. When you get into the 60s the metal seems to get a bit thinner, and once a rot takes a hold it can really go, it can run rampant. So that's something you have to really be mindful of if buying something from that era. So an MG Magnet or something like that is a certain possibility. It'd be quite a usable car. Lots of them have been upgraded to MGB running gear, which on the face of it, well, heresy, but actually MGB, it's just a slightly larger engine version of the same engine, the B series engine. So the MGB is 1800cc or just under. The Magnet is 1500cc, so maybe even one of those converted to MGB engine and box, possibly even with an overdrive gearbox. That would make for a very usable car. I'm not huge on modifying classics, but if it's using sort of parts that are contemporary and in the same family as the original, well, that is a possibility. And next on the list, a Jaguar. As you may know, you may have spotted, I am quite a fan of older Jaguars, and a couple of models of Jag have appeared and definitely have been part of the thought process in recent times. So which Jaguars, which classic Jaguars have been on my radar of late? Well, XJs. I've had a couple of Series 1 XJs going back quite a long time now, 20 odd years ago. Do I want to go down that route again? Maybe, but to be honest it's a little bit big to fit in the garage, Series 1, and to be honest, after the Series 1 V12 that I had back in the mid 1990s, anything less than that wouldn't really float my boat too much. As much as I love the 4.2, the straight 6XK power cars do sound fantastic, but they're also quite a complex car as well, so they do take quite a lot of looking after, and it's a big engine. If you have any problems with the engine, it can be quite involved repairing them, because it's a double overhead cam. You've got an aluminium cylinder head on an iron block, and if you ever had to take the head off, that could be potentially quite exciting. And I know on some of the by the time the 4.2s were used in the XJs, so 68 onwards, I know that some of the cylinder head studs, they actually pass through waterways, and that can cause all sorts of excitement if you ever have to pull them out. So as much as I love a Series 1 XJ, I don't think, certainly this time round, I don't think it'll be one of those on making onto the final shortlist, if you like. But staying with Jaguar for a minute, I've also one of my favourite Jaguars, excluding the sporting ones, which are all lovely, but in terms of Jaguar saloons, probably my favourite is the so-called Mark 1, the Jaguar 2.4 and 3.4 of the mid to late 1950s, the predecessor to the Mark 2. The Mark 1s, I think, they just look fantastic. Mark 2s are beautiful looking cars as well, and if you've seen the videos recently of Mark 2s that we've seen at shows, you'll know that I'm a big fan of them. They are lovely looking cars, but the Mark 1 just looks a little bit older, perhaps, with the thicker window surrounds, the side and the front and rear screens. There's a lot more metal around the windows, and they just look a little bit older, and I just kind of prefer that a little bit. Probably less usable than the Mark II, but I just prefer the look of the Mark 1. They have a narrower rear track on the Mark 1 compared to the Mark II, which gave them a bit of a, the handling could be a bit exciting on the limit, and sadly that proved to be the demise of Mike Hawthorne, the famous world champion of 1958. He was pedalling along a bit, and he died in a crash in his Mark 1 Jaguar, so they could be a little bit tricky on the extreme edges of the handling if you're really pushing on, but I don't tend to drive like that, so that's not really an issue. But the Mark 1 Jaguar is a stunning looking car, and something like that definitely does appeal. Will it make the shortlist? I'm not sure, because I've still got rumblings of going older than the Pilot, i.e. to somewhere in the pre-war era. Whether that'll happen or not, I'm not quite sure, but every time I sort of look at something later than the Pilot, I keep being drawn back to older than the Pilot, so pre-war at some point, and those cars are the ones that really tend to grab me. And yeah, I just think I'll probably go a little bit older than the Pilot rather than a little bit newer. But like I say, at the moment things are still a little bit up in the air, so I'm not quite sure what's going to happen. And like I say, ideally the Renault would go before we go and buy something else, just because that leaves the funding a little bit, even though only a bit of the money that this process raises will go into a replacement car. You know, the more that you've got to play with, the more options there are. What else have we got on the list? Mercedes-Benz. There was an auction recently, and there was one of the 1950s Mercedes-Benz, which one is it? The 220S, the Ponton era. So before the Fintail Mercedes, you had the so-called Ponton series of Mercedes-Benz saloons, and I think, especially the six-cylinder cars, which are a little bit longer, they look fantastic. And I've waxed lyrical many times before about Mercedes build quality and how well those things are screwed together. And there was a gorgeous black example of a Ponton Merc 220S, and it was just sensational. It had a huge amount of work done on in the past. There were bills for sort of £30,000, I think, something like that, and it was going to sell for probably under half that. And it was a lovely, lovely car, but sadly that one came along before any of the cars here had found new homes, so that wasn't viable. At the time of recording this, there was also a lovely pale blue one, mid-pale blue 220S up for sale as well, and that looks like a very, very tasty example as well. So maybe one of those, perhaps. That's certainly a possibility. They seem to have reasonably good spares support, which is a good thing, and I think the six-cylinder petrols on carburetors are pretty bomb-proof from what I can tell, and that is certainly a big tick in the box when it comes to finding something else to buy. Something, ideally, I do tend to like larger engine cars. I mean, I say that and I'm stood next to a 748cc Renault here, but I do tend to like larger engine cars because they are often a lot less stressed. You can amble along, low revs, big torquey engines. Fuel economy doesn't really matter a huge amount because you're not running these things every day, so it doesn't really come into the equation. But yeah, just nice big lazy engine, not working very hard, gives the whole car an easier time. When you've got a high revving car, very low geared, high revving car, everything's working that much harder, and so the potential for things to break is that much greater. So yeah, nice car like a 6, something like that, 6-cylinder car, that would be definitely a contender on the possibles list, depending on what we come across in the future. Staying with Mercedes, another one is W108s, the late 60s, early 70s cars, the 280s, the S and the SEs. They're very nice cars, again, 6-cylinder cars. The SEs had the fuel injection, I think it's Bosch fuel injection, and to be honest, I don't really want to get into the complexities of mechanical fuel injection from the early 1970s. If you remember the Volvo 164E that I had few years back, that had mechanical fuel injection, and to be honest, it just looked more complicated than I really wanted to get into, so I've kind of crossed off the W108 series of Mercs off the list. They did do the carburettor version as well, the 280S, and it's one of those kind of cars which I really, really admire the engineering and respect it hugely, but can I get excited about it? I'm not quite sure. That's where the Mark 1 Jaguars were winning me over the Mercedes. The Ponton Mercs, yes, I like those, 1950s. The later Mercs, while I admire them, I don't think I want to actually own one, at least at the moment anyway. And what else have we got on the possibles list? I've also been looking at pre-war Rileys as well, going back to the pre-war days. There are some
looking at pre-war Rileys too.
Harley's been looking at pre-war Rileys as well. But yeah, there are some lovely Monacos and Merlins around, and they would definitely be on budget. And I could well see one of those cars being here in the garage at OCC HQ at some point, whether it's this time around or maybe in future, maybe a few years down the line, who knows. But in terms of usable pre-war cars, the Riley 9s and 12s, etc., they have an awful lot going for them. Anyway, that I think is probably enough for this particular video. An update on how my plan to rationalise things, streamline things a little bit here at OCC HQ is going, and what may or may not come along to replace these three when they all eventually go. So thank you so much for watching this video. Let me know in the comments what you think. Have you gone through a similar process to this, whether with cars or classic motorcycles, lorries, whatever? Downsizing, reducing the amount of stuff that you have to keep on top of. Let me know in the comments your thoughts. So thank you so much for watching. Please check the rest of the channel out. If you haven't subscribed, please think about it. I know probably most of the people who watch this video aren't actually subscribed at the time of watching, and it really helps the channel grow. So if you could sub, it doesn't cost anything, that would be fantastic. So thanks a lot, bye for now. Well, in just a few hours time a recovery vehicle will be here to take away the little Standard. I'll be sorry to see it go. It's been a great little run around, and yeah, economical, cheap to run, easy to drive, yeah, all round pretty neat little car, needing a bit of TLC in certain places, so something of a rolling restoration, but hopefully the new owner will pick up the mantle and see that done. But yeah, it's been an interesting 3 or 4 years with this one. Obviously I rebuilt the brakes and did a few jobs to the electrics to sort the charging system out. You may remember watching videos about that at the time, just a few years back. But yeah, well, I'll be sorry to see this one go, but well, can't keep them all, and there'll be something else along, no doubt, before too long. Like I say, it's just a couple of hours or so till the recovery guy is coming. So let's just have a quick final look around before she heads off. I've dug out a few bits and pieces, dug out the old literature, so that's all good. A few spare bits and bobs. Yeah. Little note as to where the ignition is, because there's no ignition key on these, just a turn switch that you see in the middle there. So I put a little note on there, and also some notes in with the paperwork just explaining the start procedure. But yeah, off to a new home. Harley's been off school this week, half term, so he's been helping me out a little bit today. We had a bit of a reorganisation in the garage. I dug out that old Rover grill, maybe P2 or P3. It's a bit knocked about, a bit bent in various places, but as yard art, garage art, it's just perfect. So yeah, there's a little Renault A40 tucked away over here. I've had a bit of a move around with some of the odds and ends that are in here, just to make life a little bit easier, make a little bit more space as well, so that's good. About 8 o'clock I think the recovery guy is due to come and pick up the Standard. I know this one was a favourite with many of the viewers here on the Old Classic Car channel, so apologies for disappointing anyone, but sometimes you just have to make these tough decisions, and I'm sure this one will go on to a good home.